ready to roll? Okay. Good morning, and I'd like to thank you for coming here today. Today I asked for a press conference concerning the report that was issued by the New York State Controller yesterday. And I want to thank Mr. Carnwright and his assistant, Mr. Paul, for being in attendance here today as well, who did a great job, okay, with assisting our controller and the New York State Controller, okay, with their investigation, which resulted, as we all know now, 4 misdemeanor charges, okay, against former Fire Chief Richard Salzman. The Controller, New York State Controller, issued a report to the media prior to myself or Mr. Toohey reviewing same. And they never asked my administration for a statement. As a matter of fact, I got it from the Freeman, the Daily Freeman, and I'd like to thank Mr. Kirby because, and I normally wouldn't do that, but I want to thank the Freeman for sending us the email which had the press release that was issued by the New York State Controller. Now, albeit that I'm very pleased and I'm grateful on behalf of the City of Kingston taxpayers for the Controller's assistance, the New York State Controller's assistance, professionalism, and thorough review, I am dismayed and perplexed to why the city did not get the press release, which did not clarify nor distinguish my administration and Mr. Toohey's efforts, my Corp Counsel's efforts, at reform and implementing a transparent and accountable government compared to the last several years of a culture of entitlement. In addition, the press release gives the impression the New York State Controller identified the lack of transparent, accountable, lack of review in the verification process as it pertains to time and attendance, overtime, and compensatory process. I'm here now publicly to assure the public otherwise, that the city asked the New York State Controller assistance and with Mr. Toohey, okay, to address the matter, okay, that we're now dealing with. And Mr. Toohey should be complimented, our city controller, as should Chief Tinty, who's here today as well, because prior to the situation at the fire department involving former Chief Salzman and former Chief Ray, Mr. Toohey, our controller, along with Chief Tinty, have put in place a centralized time and attendance policy, and also with respect to overtime and comp time process that is now reviewable and verified, and now the responsibility of the mayor's office to sign off on and approve time and attendance and overtime and compensatory time that's been requested. Heretofore, up until this point, that was not the case. For the past several years, there was no centralized supervision from the mayor's office to ensure that the time and attendance requested or the payouts requested were in fact verifiable. So again, thank you to the New York State Controller, but respectfully submitted in the future, could you kindly provide the report to the city prior to sending it to the media? A phone call that I received yesterday at 9 o'clock while I was across the river for another appointment, okay, with a message that the report was forthcoming is clearly inappropriate, unacceptable, and not professional. And it's my understanding the controller will be reviewing that process today. So, and the reason why I'm having this press conference, as I alluded to earlier, is also because by sending the report to the media first, it causes confusion to the public, and it doesn't amplify essentially what this administration has done on behalf of the taxpayers. And also, too, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for a public official to respond, okay, to the report so that they can provide an intelligent comment and statement to the media. So therein lies why there's some need, if you will, for the New York State Controller to have better coordination between its press division and General Counsel's office and the auditing team who provided the report. Prior to being elected, I pledged to restructure our government, to be transparent and accountable. I pledged, in essence, to reform our government for the public good, not others' interests, which was nothing more at that time and for the past several, potentially decades, a culture of entitlement for a select few. Since taking office on January 1st, 2012, I am proud of my administration and the employees of our city of Kingston, as I feel that we are on the road to reform and governing more transparently and accountable for the taxpayers of our great city. I want to thank Mr. Toohey, our controller, and his office, who worked diligently and for several months, sacrificed, worked hard, and were under significant pressure and stress to assist the New York State Controller with respect to that audit. Thank you to you and your employees, Mr. Toohey. They did a great job. I want to thank also, though, the other city employees, because today is a disappointment, but it's not a black eye on the city workforce. The BPW employees, the City Hall employees, the Kingston Police Department employees, the Sewage Treatment Plant employees, the Bus Division, the Recreation Department, and the Kingston Fire Department. We saw how professional the Kingston Fire Department functioned, a few weeks ago with that fire on Franklin Street. And just because of a couple of bad apples, if you'll pardon the expression, that doesn't spoil the entire bunch. I am so proud, and the public should be proud, because the employees who work in all of our city agencies work hard. They're doing more for less, and it's about time that the public, realize and the council acknowledge their good work. So again, thank you very much. And notwithstanding, this bad, disappointing day and the results of the New York State Controller with reference to 2 employees and a prior employee in the Kingston Police Department, I want the public to know that our employees are working diligently, doing more for less, and do care about taxpayer dollars. In January of 2012, the Controller of the City of Kingston, Mr. Toohey, conducted an audit on the Fire Department, Chief Richard Salzman. His findings identified discrepancies in time and attendance, supplemental payouts, overtime, and comp time payouts. Now, prior to the audit with respect to the Kingston Fire Department, former Chiefs Salzman and Ray, Mr. Toohey's office, and as I stated earlier, with the assistance of Chief Tinty, put in place a more centralized system which requires review and verification by my office for any department head's time off request or payout, as well as the employees. Since the audit of the New York State Controller, Mr. Toohey has implemented, his office has implemented, with my support, and proposed more procedure with respect to the review and verification of time and attendance, overtime, and compensatory payouts. Again, thanks to Mr. Toohey, we have a transparent, accountable process. And with his additional recommendations to the council, we shall have a process that is more serving the interests of the taxpayers. It's a sad day, as I said earlier. I'm disappointed. For the last several years, there has been no review, no verification, no oversight of departmental employee payouts for their time and attendance accruals, their overtime and compensatory payouts, or for their retirement payouts. Indeed, prior administrations, unfortunately, condoned, gave consent, permitted the practice utilized by Salzman and Ray to literally receive time off, compensatory, supplemental, overtime payouts that were never reviewed nor verified by the mayor at that time. Thousands of dollars, potentially, were paid out erroneously, incorrectly, not subject to any review and/or verification. That's a fact. That's a fact. Indeed, it was a culture of entitlement for a select few, sanctioned by city officials and ignored by the city council, who never questioned the payments issued to department heads or employees while they were on the job and at their retirement. So let's look at the results of this culture of entitlement. And for those of you who have the report, if you haven't reviewed it, I'd strongly suggest and call your attention to pages 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10 respectively. We all know now with the report, I believe, in the papers yesterday, that there was $23,000 that a number of people throughout the city were not entitled to, which included former salzman receiving, Chief Salzman receiving $5,558, former Chief Ray receiving $16,656 that the controller believes they were not entitled to. It's on page 5. Mr. Salzman submitted different accrual records in one period of review that showed multiple discrepancies, as I alluded to earlier, which were initially identified by Controller Toohey and confirmed, obviously, by the New York State Controller. He didn't record all his vacation time he used throughout the 2-year period they examined. He didn't charge vacation leave accruals, okay? There was no sources able to confirm or corroborate, okay, that in fact he was entitled to the time. Indeed, cell phone records showed that, in fact, he was out of the area, but yet was paid for that time. Additionally, the overtime approval forms for the hours worked by Chief Salzman were signed by someone else, meaning, I don't know if it was the mayor or perhaps the assistant chief or whoever, 7 out of 31 times. With respect to Mr. Ray, you had a situation where his accruals didn't show charges to his leave accruals for 4 days in 2010, and with respect to his time off requests, according to the report by the New York State Controller, there were 22 days charged on Mr. Ray's 2010 and 2011 accrual records, okay, but with no time off requests presented by former Chief Ray. That's on page 7. Indeed, both individuals couldn't explain why, in fact, this were the case. Indeed, they did not maintain their records, nor did the city receive any of those records, okay, to review and verify their requests for payment or payout. Both of these former fire chiefs benefited from payments they were not entitled to. And additionally, that their contracts that they had entered into with the prior administration were not adhered to or complied with. Indeed, it was a practice apparently by both former fire chiefs to just verbally say that they were taking the time off without any subsequent documentation. Totally unacceptable, and in the real world, the private sector, we all know that that's not the norm. And it shouldn't be the norm in the public sector, particularly when we're dealing with taxpayer dollars. Totally unacceptable. There were no internal controls, in other words, over employee time and attendance. No internal controls, in other words, over the comp time and the overtime process. No internal controls whatsoever. No supervision, no oversight, no questioning by the city council when the payments were issued during this period, or these periods. So where are we at? We now have an opportunity for my administration and our city council to provide assurances to the taxpayers that there is now a centralized, transparent, and accountable review with verification process of all time and attendance for all department heads, for all city employees going forward. Why? To avoid fraud, to avoid abuse, to avoid literally stealing from the taxpayers. And given the fact that now we're putting so many people out of their homes, our seniors, business, okay, because they can't pay their taxes, given the fact that there are so many people unemployed out there looking for work, given the fact of the obvious, given the local economy, the regional economy, the state economy, the national economy, and what it's doing to our families and our hardworking people out there, this kind of behavior, the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability, the lack of internal controls cannot be tolerated. And it will not be tolerated, and it will not be accepted by my administration. And thank God that I have people like Mr. Toohey, Chief Tinty, who responded quickly, and Mr. Zwiebin as my corp counsel, who can give me counsel and guidance and advise, okay, accordingly, how we could put in a transparent, accountable system and govern in the best interest of the public. I would encourage, therefore, the council to review thoroughly the report from the New York State Comptroller. I am surprised at this time, however, no council member has responded to the report in a manner that demonstrates and acknowledges the lack of internal controls that apparently were prevalent and institutionalized in this culture of entitlement. I am really perplexed that there's been no response along those lines as to the contents of the report or its recommendations. A culture that has caused cynicism and disrespect for our city government by the public. And why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't the result of what we're talking about today and the hard work of Mr. Carnwright, his office, and his associate, Mr. Povell, and Mr. Toohey, why wouldn't people be cynical? Why wouldn't they be suspicious? Why wouldn't they lack trust? It's obvious. Because they see others benefiting from a culture that it's like putting your nose up against the window and looking in and seeing everyone eating at the dining room or the dinner table and wondering, hey, can I get some of that? Well, no, because you don't know the cook. You don't know the host. Unacceptable for the taxpayers nowadays. Unacceptable. So, this is not a political issue. Contrary to the critics of my administration and those who supported me, I did not create this mess. I didn't create this culture of entitlement. I didn't foster its continuation. This is not a vendetta politically against anyone, be it Mr. Salzman or Mr. Ray. I'm doing my job. I was elected by the taxpayers to represent their interests. I have a fiduciary duty to protect their tax-paying interests. I have responsibilities that I can't shirk or avoid. It has nothing to do with a political vendetta against anyone, and quite frankly, the taxpayers should be offended by those who support this kind of conduct and think it's no big deal, but then just dismiss it or say that I'm doing this because of politics. Please, that's disingenuous and it's disrespectful to the taxpayers. In other words, the mayor and the council have an opportunity to work together to address this matter. We have an opportunity to continue with more transparent, accountable internal controls to avoid this from happening in the future. Indeed, it's not only an opportunity for the mayor and the council to cooperate and work together for the common public good, it is going to be required of the council to take corrective action according to the New York State Comptroller's report. That means that within the next 90 days, when Mr. Toohey submits, his recommendations further in compliance with the findings and recommendations of the New York State Comptroller's report, that means they have to take corrective action within 90 days. And I look forward to the discussions, that'll be upcoming with members, with Mr. Noble, our president of the City Council, along with the members of the City Council. I'm looking very forward to that. We need to cooperate. We need to assist each other. We need to be partners to resolve this matter and ensure taxpayer dollars are protected from fraud and abuse. Our public demands on this and other issues, this issue particularly, we work together. There's no other way around it. I'm also encouraging each union representative representing our public employees, who I stated earlier have done an incredible job doing more for less, and I mean that sincerely, and I want to thank them again, that those union reps thoroughly review the Comptroller's report, New York State Comptroller's report, and ask pertinent questions of Mr. Toohey or my office or the Corporation Counsel, Mr. Zwiebin, and the council, the City Council, to assist us with taking corrective action. Now, there are mandatory subjects of bargaining with respect to some of these new procedures that have been proposed by Mr. Toohey's office, meaning mandatory subjects of bargaining where you have to sit down and negotiate first with the union under the Taylor law. For instance, time and attendance. For instance, time clocks. So before we put those items in place, we have to discuss same and come to some agreement. I'm hopeful, though, that the unions will cooperate to that end and that it doesn't become adversarial. Now, should we not get cooperation to implement such items as a time clock or the time and attendance, I will be certain to bring it to the attention of the public that apparently, okay, the corrective action isn't necessary according to some. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that everyone, be it the council, the unions, will be able to sit down and work together, be partners, cooperate, and ensure that the corrective action is taken, that it will be for the best interest of the city, it will be in the best interest of the departments where those employees work and where they represent them. And I'm looking forward to working with all three unions to that end as well. I want to again thank the New York State Controller. I want to thank Mr. Carnwright very much and Josh Povil for sticking it out and for your help. Mr. Toohey, again, for your efforts, and the Corp Council, who were involved with this okay too for the past year. Thank you very much, and again, the employees who were all involved. I want to thank the public for its support and cooperation, and hopefully confidence that the administration, my administration, it's no longer business as usual. We now have an open, transparent, accountable government. It will continue to improve. Our goal is open, transparent, accountable government that is in the best interest of all of our city taxpayers. So with that, I want to thank you for coming, and if you have any questions, feel free.